Why is happiness so important? Because you were mentioning the levels. This person says, I thought our goal was to be holy, not happy. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, well, I might just start off with the adage of the great Aristotle a long time ago, which became the adage, by the way, of St. Thomas Aquinas. Aristotle said, happiness is the one thing you can choose for itself. Everything else is chosen for the sake of happiness. So what he meant by that is, once you have a definition of happiness in your mind, then of course you start making all of your other decisions according to that definition. Whether you even know it or not, if you have it in the back of your mind or in the forefront of your mind, that definition of happiness is going to determine, what do you think of yourself? Is your life going forward? Is it going backward? Are you making something of yourself? Are you not making? Are you worth something? Are you not worth something? Are you a success? Are you not a success? What kind of friends are you going to make? What kinds of careers you're going to choose? What kind of spouse you're going to choose? Every single decision that we make is for the sake of happiness, said Aristotle, a principle, of course, which St. Thomas Aquinas, abided in and believed. So the one term we got to get straight in the minds of not only our young people, but everyone, is we want to get to the highest levels of happiness that will include, as St. Thomas Aquinas would say, all the dimensions of their being, all the dimensions of their soul. So we want to give them that sense of the highest levels of happiness. So we rank them as level 1, 2, 3, and 4. And by the way, this is in St. Augustine's Confessions as well. St. Augustine uses the Latin terms Laetus for level 1, and Felix for level 2, and Beatus for level 3, and Sublimitas for level 4. But they've got 4 words for happiness. Problem with English is we only have one. Happiness, 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 and happiness. And that makes for a real problem. But getting back to the questioner's notion of holiness, we would call holiness level 4 happiness. So the idea then is, well, don't we want to be holy? Yes, of course we want to be holy. And that is the highest level of happiness. That's level 4 happiness. But remember, we've got to go through this thicket, or this forest, of other views of happiness that are constantly impinging upon not just us, but upon our kids, and heavily impinging on our kids. So they're going to be given a materialistic and pleasure view of happiness, right? Happiness is the maximum number of pleasure impulses per second and the most number of toys I can get. That's level 1. Or level 2 happiness. Happiness is ego comparative happiness. Who's achieving more? Who's achieving less? Who's smarter? Who's less smart? Who's got more status, less status, more popular, less popular, more power, less power, more control, less control? You get the point. The whole thing of ego comparative happiness, 70% of our young people are right at that level of happiness. We got to sort it out for them and get them through that so they can get to contributive happiness, which is the first stage to holiness, where they're learning how to be not only contributive to culture, but contributive to others, and to follow Jesus' beatitudes in love. And then finally, to get them to level 4, which is that transcendent happiness, their ultimate dignity and destiny, right? That's going to be the one that comes through faith, and that's going to be the one that says holiness is where we want to be. And if we are holy, all the other kinds of happiness will follow, but they will follow in their proper place. They won't get exaggerated out of place so that we forget our transcendent nature, we forget our contributive nature, we forget empathy, we forget prayer, we forget conscience, right? We forget virtue, and all we want to do is just be better than others, more powerful than others, and have more toys than others. So that's the key thing. So happiness is the bigger word. Holiness is the 4th stage, which is the higher word that brings all the other levels of happiness together. Great question.
Let me ask you, Father, just as a follow-up of my own understanding. Is it possible for someone to be holy but not happy?
Well, you can be holy and happy in one sense, which would most of Christian theologians would call that gaude, would call that joy, right? So when you have a spiritual joy, you can feel spiritual joy, right? But you can also at the same time feel like, oh gosh, maybe I'm not happy in another sense, right? So sometimes people are suffering. They're very holy people, and they're suffering. But what we want to do is help people to see how that holiness can bring their suffering into joy. So we give them, for example, the example of Saint Therese of Lisieux, right? And she, of course, suffered hugely, right? Her tuberculosis was not just debilitating, it was downright painful. And of course, yes, did she feel that pain? Yes. Would you call that pain happiness? Not in itself. But what St. Therese of Lisieux knew through her holiness, her level 4 happiness, is that she could give this all as a gift to the one who had loved her, as she called it, to her beloved. She could give this not only as a gift to him, but she could offer it up for the salvation of the entire world, especially for the souls that have most need of that grace. So she imitated Jesus, who offered his sufferings to the Father for the salvation of the world. She did the very same thing. And so as she's suffering in pain in her last days, she is immensely joy-filled. As Mother Teresa just kind of sprang to life, immensely joy-filled at the very prospect of not only being a gift to her, the one who's loved her, right, the one who, for whom she is the beloved, but also that she can do this efficaciously so that her pain will begin to redeem the world through the grace of God and through the sufferings of Jesus Christ. So yes, she turned it into joy, but you have to know how to do that. So yes, if there is a discrepancy between holiness and happiness, we need to give some education, what I might call a little Therese of Lisieux education, or a little Thomas Aquinas education, or a little St. Peter Faber education, so that we can help people to learn how to bring a true happiness out of the pain that they may be suffering in this world. Because once they leave this world, if they do that, they're going to be happy forever, which is called the beatific vision, right? Beatific means, right, beatitude means happiness. The vision of happiness through holiness forever without the possibility of any pain. But another great question.